Reckless Ben's now finally free to talk about the bricks and minifigs case, and he's laying it all out in a wild part 3. FIFA's now investigating alleged racial abuse against iShowSpeed, one of the biggest streamers in the world. Trump's now attacking NATO allies and says that the ceasefire with Iran's over, and you already have both sides launching dozens of strikes. You now have new footage that allegedly shows Tyler Robinson on campus the day Charlie Kirk was murdered. We're talking about breaking down and diving into all of that and even more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, starting with this. This all-out war between bricks and minifigs and Reckless Ben and just kind of the internet at large, it just keeps getting crazier and crazier, and we now have even more updates. And the reason you've got so much more to talk about now is that Ben, he's no longer silenced by a gag order, and so he's got a lot to say.
Right now, their strategy is to get me arrested before I get them arrested. So now, I'm gonna Uno reverse this and get Eamon, the CEO, arrested before he gets me arrested.
And to back up a little bit for all my beautiful normies out there who have lives that are not addicted to the internet, Ben is accusing Lego reseller Bricks and Minifigs of stealing a collection of Star Wars Legos from a man by the name of Brian Mansell that's worth around maybe $200,000, though that number has been contested, with a company claiming it's really more like $100,000. The main thing, if you're talking about 5 to 6 figures of Legos, that's still a lot of money, right? Mansell, you had him entering into a consignment deal with a BAM franchise in Oregon, but corporate then seized that store and gave it to new owners, and Ben claims that that is when the Legos were stolen. So you then had Ben going on this crusade to get the Legos back, tracking down the CEO of BAM and the new owners of the franchise that initially entered in a consignment agreement to sell Brian's Legos. And to make a very long and involved story short, everything spirals out of control. BAM brings a RICO and defamation suit against Ben, his team, and Brian. They also then hit Ben with a gag order that prevented him from talking or posting content about bricks and minifigs.
And for the last couple months, this company's been doing whatever they can to get me arrested so they can keep all the Legos for themselves.
And when we last talked about all this insanity, Ben had posted a video claiming that BAM had agreed to lift the gag order while the rest of the case played out. But the judge overseeing the case refused to sign off on the paperwork lifting the gag order. And so then you had him saying that he took the matter to federal court, and eventually the federal judge agreed to lift the gag order yesterday, saying in a court filing that Ben can resume talking about the case online, publishing court findings, and generally continue his investigative journalism. Though I will say, among other things, it does prevent Ben from going within 100 yards of the plaintiffs and any BAM property, and he's not allowed to solicit store employees for certain information. Right? And then very notably here, you had the court filing also saying that both sides agreed to move forward with mediation, indicating that they want to try and reach a settlement instead of going to trial, but also the outcome, it's still up in the air. But also regardless, Ben's now able to talk about this whole situation again, and so yesterday, he finally shared part 3 of his documentary series on Patreon, and he posted it unlisted on his YouTube channel. And what you have is this video, it goes beyond just the civil suit, right? You've got Ben saying that there are 2 criminal cases against him. The first is in American Fork, Utah, and that's related to his efforts to track down and serve legal papers to the new owners who took over the Oregon franchise. And in that case, you got Ben claiming that he doesn't know exactly what he's being charged with because police body cam footage has been redacted. But you've also got prosecutors telling a judge that they need a protective order for new franchise owners that would prevent Ben from accessing that footage.
If this defendant were to represent himself and we were to provide body cams and discovery, we would be now providing additional information and fodder for this defendant to create videos from which he could profit by placing them on YouTube at the expense of our victim.
And you've got Ben saying that the judge agreed to sign the protective order, claiming that he didn't care about the evidence Ben says he presented. Then the bulk of the video, it's really focused on the second criminal case against Ben, which is in Provo, Utah, and it centers around his confrontation with the CEO of BAM, Amon McNeff, at BAM headquarters. And in that case, you got Ben saying that McNeff told police that he wanted to charge him with extortion.
They themselves say, hey, you guys stole this product from this person. If you don't give it back, I'm going to burn the place down. Or we're going to burn the place down. Or I'll kill you.
But Ben, he claims that no one ever made those threats and that the video he filmed from the interaction proves it. Now, notably here, we've already seen big parts of that confrontation in Ben's earlier videos, with Ben repeatedly claiming that they show McNeff lying when he says that the company doesn't have Brian's Legos. And you have him repeating those claims again in part 3, while also claiming that McNeff's alleged lies amount to criminal obstruction of evidence.
Eamon McNeff actually committed a crime. I have tons of crimes on camera that Eamon McNeff has committed.
So Ben and his team, they go to the Provo Police Department to report the alleged obstruction crime, and he says that they agree to open an investigation. But then ultimately, you've got Ben getting a letter informing him that the police have actually taken up McNeff.
We agreed that there really was no extortion code that would fit your situation. However, you know, at the end of the day, we do want to help you guys so you're not having to deal with this fool and all of his issues. We did find that there was another code that fit, and it's called aggravated commercial obstruction. However, the tricky thing is that we have to prove that this individual either entered or remains unlawfully on the premise. When he came to the property, did you have to ask him more than once to leave?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, we're not leaving until we get it. And he's like, no.
And while you've been again claiming that this video proves he never extorted McNeff, he does admit this.
But we did show back up a second time, and to Ammon's credit, about halfway through the conversation, he did say that if we don't leave, he's gonna call the cops on us.
You can leave. If you come back here, we will call the cops. If you don't leave right now, I will call the cops.
And you've got Ben saying that after that, McNeff asked for proof of ownership over the Legos, claiming he didn't leave because he wanted to show him that proof. And so you have Ben claiming that he pulled up some footage to show McNeff, and that's when he asked them to leave the premises for the second time.
Now extortion?
Because we caught you guys?
No, because you are attempting to extort us. Okay, you've been asked to leave. Please leave.
We have to leave?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for working with us, and so see you later.
And so Ben, he says that they left after that, but in the police body cam footage that Ben obtained, you can hear McNeff saying that he asked them to leave multiple times, and they didn't. And then later in the video, Ben plays audio from a court hearing where he tries to tell the prosecutor that his footage proves he never threatened McNeff during their interaction at corporate HQ. But the prosecutor replies that's because the footage only starts when Ben's going up the elevator and stops when he's coming back down, right? Rather than showing him entering and exiting the building itself. Strictly speaking, it doesn't show everything.
Obviously, a video doesn't necessarily show everything that possibly happened.
But notably here, you had a local outlet in Utah reporting that prosecutors didn't actually charge Ben with extortion or aggravated commercial obstruction in the Provo case. Instead, saying they charged him with disorderly conduct and trespassing. Right, but then also, beyond that, you had Ben tackling this whole dispute over who's got the correct store inventory list. Right, because according to Brian and the former store owner, they have an inventory from the day the store was seized that showed which sets were still in their possession. But corporate, they've said that the inventory is wrong and that they conducted their own correct inventory when they took over the store. And on top of that, you have McNeff claiming that Bricks and Minifigs repeatedly offered to give Brian their version of the inventory, as well as some Legos, but that Brian always refused. But then the thing is there, you've got Brian, Ben, and the former store owner all saying the opposite, saying that they've been requesting the inventory for over a year and they've just gotten stonewalled. And you have Ben publishing an email thread that he claims shows Bricks and Minifigs ghosting Brian's lawyers and then eventually responding that the new store owners have no legal obligation to return any Legos to Brian. Meanwhile, during Ben's confrontation with McNeff at corporate HQ, the CEO apparently promised to send him the inventory if he just requests it through this one specific email. But you've got Ben saying that when he did that, the response he got was,
Mr. Schneider, BAM Franchising Incorporation will not participate in any form of communication that appears designed for public provocation, harassment, or manipulation of facts for the purpose of media content. Attempts to obtain privileged or confidential information through misrepresentation or the creation of fraudulent documents.
So you have him speculating that the whole thing, it was really just a trap, that McNeff only told him to email for the inventory so that corporate could get Ben's email address, and then
They subpoenaed Google asking for all private information tied to this email address. And Google sent them like hundreds of hours of all the raw footage from everything I've filmed to the Lego video so far, all my emails, all my search history, all the metadata that shows everywhere I've been.
right, and then after that, you have Ben claiming again that the police are colluding with BAM to pin him with trumped up charges, playing some clips from the body cam footage where the officer seemed dismissive of his allegations after he posted his first video and adding,
But at least now I can see why the police aren't listening to me. They're basically just saying that all of the evidence I submit to them is not credible and therefore case closed. Ben's wrong and we're right because we said that the evidence is uncredible. At this point, Bricks and Minifigs is working with the police to just come up with whatever story they can to make any evidence I give them seem as uncredible as possible.
So yeah, as far as the meat of the story, that's where things stand right now. Or with what appears to be 2 criminal cases and at least 1 civil suit hanging over Ben's head. Though again, I say appears because just a caveat to all this, right now we're really just getting Ben's perspective here about the whole video, and I'll be honest, the whole situation is just a fucking mess. Right, a lot of the details, they're still very unclear, and it's also gonna be very helpful for us to hear from the other side, the judges in this case, and it's just really hard to tell how much context is or is not missing. But for now, things are moving forward. Ben has got his mic back, and it is just, again, a continuation of an absolute PR nightmare for Bricks and Minifigs. And with all this, I will say, even despite the potential prison time that's hanging over his head, he seems to be having fun with all this.
If they want to apologize, they can say that they're sorry by doing the chicken dance. And I will take that as a sincere form of apology. And once they do the chicken dance, then I will know that Bricks and Minifigs is sorry, and we can finally move on to the next video series. It'll be awesome.
And while I'll technically say it is not clear how serious that offer is, he has also, I will say, promised that episode 4 is coming soon. And actually,
And also subscribe to part 5, subscribe to part 6, part 7, all the way to part 100. We're doing 100 parts.
but hey, with this one just being a wild one to dive through and watch, I think I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts, opinions, and reactions here? And then there's more we're gonna dive into in just a minute. But first, let me thank a sponsor and say, there's a huge difference between not having the time to cook and not having time to eat. And for me, Some days I've got time to make dinner, some days I'll heat something up, and some days lunch is just kind of whatever's closest. And that's exactly where today's sponsor Huel fits into my day. I like Huel because it's a complete meal, not something that you drink on top of food. It's what I reach for when the alternative is eating whatever I happen to find first. And personally, I've been using Huel Black Edition powder. It has over 40 grams of protein, 27 essential vitamins and minerals, no artificial sweeteners, colors, or flavors, and mixes with water or milk in about 30 seconds. And so like if I'm running out the door, I'll grab the ready to drink bottle instead. That is 35 grams of protein, 7 grams of fiber, and costs under $5 a meal. And also the biggest thing for me is that it removes the decision. You know, I don't have to figure out what to eat. I just eat. To replace those more random meals where I somehow convince myself snacks counted as lunch. And hey, if that sounds familiar, just scan that QR code or head to huel.com/DeFranco15 and use code DeFranco15 for 15% off your first online order. It's new customers only and huel.com/DeFranco15, code DeFranco15, and thank you to Huel for partnering with and supporting the show. But then diving right back into the news, we've got to talk about Charlie Kirk, because you've got new video footage that allegedly shows Tyler Robinson walking around Utah Valley University's campus before and after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Right, that, it ended up being one of the biggest reveals in court yesterday, along with the fact that Robinson allegedly interacted with Turning Point USA reps prior to the killing.
Do you believe you recognize who that person is?
Yes.
Who is that?
I believe that's Tyler Robinson.
All right, where does he go from there?
He heads out of the parking garage on foot into the campus and actually goes to the quad area of the campus. At that time, he makes contact with some representatives from TPUSA.
You believe this is Mr. Robinson returning to campus?
I do, yes.
Okay. And why do you believe it's Mr. Robinson?
The shoes are the same.
He's noticeably wearing different clothing.
He is wearing different clothing, and he also is walking with a gait or a limp in this video. And again, in the top left corner, the individual is now seen running across the rooftop of the Losi building.
You believe this to be Mr. Robinson?
I do, yes.
And how long is he out there on the edge of the building?
Just until the reported shot was fired at 12:23 and 28.
Right, so that was a Utah prosecutor questioning Utah State Bureau of Investigation agent David Huel. You have them saying that these videos trace Robinson's alleged movements the day that Charlie was killed and even in the hours after. Right, with that investigator revealing that while the manhunt was taking place overnight, it appears that Robinson's car was about to make a turn onto the campus, but he was stopped by an officer who spoke to him. And while we don't know what was said, it resulted in that officer flagging the license plate.
I guess cop intuition, but there was something about the interaction that made him make a note of the license plate of the vehicle. And then subsequently, when information was available that that vehicle or a vehicle matching the description of that was involved in the incident, he ran the information that he had obtained from the stop and was able to identify that it was registered to Mr. Robinson, and he had in fact had contact with Mr. Robinson on the morning of September 11th, 2025.
And all of this questioning, it's part of a week-long preliminary hearing where you have prosecutors trying to prove that they have enough evidence to take Tyler Robinson to trial for the murder of Charlie Kirk. And while this hearing, it's not a trial itself, you've got outlets saying it kind of will resemble a mini trial as prosecutors put together their evidence and officers provide testimony. And so then with that, it'll also give us insight into the defense's strategy here, especially since Robinson has yet to enter a plea. Also, you're seeing that Erica Kirk's been attending the hearing, as have Charlie's parents and other guests like Donald Trump Jr., putting them all in the same room with the alleged killer. And as for what his family has to say, well, before the hearing kicked off, Erica released a joint statement from her, his parents, and sister saying that every court proceeding has been incredibly painful, and adding, out of respect for the judicial process, we will not be commenting further at this time. We ask for continued privacy as we navigate this process in immense grief. And with all this, there's been a ton of tension in these hearings over a number of matters, including that footage you just saw. Because on Monday, when other videos were presented to the court, the public didn't get to see them. It was only viewable to those inside. So you had that prompting just a ton of outrage among people who've been closely following this case, and they wanted to get the insight provided by these videos. And while Robinson's lawyer wanted to prevent surveillance footage of him going public to protect his right to a fair trial, yesterday you had the judge allowing us to get a peek of some videos. Also, there's been a ton of back and forth about DNA that's being admitted, and that's because you have investigators saying that they found the alleged murder weapon wrapped in a towel in a wooded area near where the assassination took place, and the towel appears to have the DNA of two people, Robinson's roommate, who's cooperated with the prosecution, and the second is likely Robinson. But the defense, they've been questioning the reliability of that DNA, arguing that it is not a conclusive match. And that, of course, is not going to be the only time that Robinson's roommate comes up, as you have prosecutors likely going to be focusing on a note that he allegedly wrote for his roommate saying, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." And of course, this hearing, it's drawn a lot of attention. According to the AP, some spectators camped outside of the courthouse overnight to be able to get inside. We've also seen responses kind of from all over the place. You had Trump Jr., who, like we said, was present, going on Fox News to say that he thinks a very clear case is being formed against Robinson.
But having literally been there in the room, seen the evidence with my own eyes, it's very clear to me that Tyler Robinson will be found guilty.
But also a big thing here is like, kind of no matter what happens in that courtroom, there are going to be people who just do not believe what the prosecutors are saying. Right, and connected to that, you're the New York Times speaking to some of the people that were outside of the courthouse. And I mean, some, they think Charlie isn't even actually dead. There are also then others who think we barely scratched the surface when it comes to his killing. And then I guess also on that note, you've got people like Candace Owens sounding off about these hearings as well, because before they began, she wrote, "You will hear the Fed's narrative absent any ability for the defense to meaningfully dispute it. What you can expect, aside from Erica's tears, are an orbit of her payrolled influencers trying to convince you that the unvetted evidence is overwhelming and undeniable, saying the real trial will come later. Charlie's army is growing. Ultimately, truth will win." And she has spent the days since questioning the evidence being put forward, implying that the videos played do not actually show Robinson, and also fighting with leaders in TPUSA and Ben Shapiro. But also, as far as what's next, I mean, very likely this is going to be heading to trial. Right, prosecutors, they don't even have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Robinson's responsible for Kirk's death here, just that there is probable cause for him to be tried. Right, so you've got a lower burden of proof right now. And so while understandably, you're going to have a lot of people focused on this, talking about this, this is really the stage getting set for the full thing to play out. You know, while it may take years for like that entire process to play out, Trump's deal with Iran, it might be shattered into pieces by the end of today. And that's if it's not already been shattered. Because you even have Trump himself saying that the ceasefire deal is over. Oil prices, they're already spiking again. And ultimately, the only successful deal this man has reached with Iran, it might have been the one that lets it choose which of its citizens are okay to be deported from the US after seeking asylum for fear of being imprisoned, tortured, or executed back home. But starting with the war, let's do a little recap. Because last month, you had the US and Iran signing this 14-point MOU that was supposed to end the war, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and kick off a 60-day negotiating period to reach a final deal addressing various other issues. You know, the small stuff like the fate of Iran's nuclear program, little things. The talks to reach this final deal had been due to start after a days-long funeral now underway for Iran's former supreme leader, who was assassinated by the US and Israel on the first day of the war. And while in the meantime, both sides, they were trading fire and accusing each other of violations, neither side abandoned the ceasefire entirely. You even saw a decent uptick in traffic through the strait, although of course there have still been far fewer ships passing through than before the war. And that waterway has also continued to be a major source of tension between the two sides. And that's partly because the MOU only says that Iran won't charge ships to transit the strait for 60 days, and it also says Iran will have a role in future administration and maritime services in the waterway. And so with the middle of the strait considered just too dangerous to travel because of the risk of mines that were laid by Iran's military, Iran's been demanding that ships pass through on its side. But at the same time, you've had the US Navy helping guide ships through the side closer to Oman, and Iran's accused the US of violating the MOU by trying to open new sea lanes without its permission. And actually connected to that, you have a trio of oil and gas tankers attacked in the strait yesterday. And while Iran, they never claimed responsibility, it's widely believed to have been behind the attacks. So you had the US appearing to respond first by revoking a sanctions waiver that allowed Iran to sell oil for 60 days. And then you had the military launching what it described as a new round of offensive strikes against over 80 targets in Iran, reportedly including Iranian air defense systems, command and control centers, coastal radar sites, anti-ship missile capabilities, and more than 60 Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps small ships in and near the strait. And you had US Central Command claiming these strikes aimed, quote, to degrade Iran's ability to continue attacking international commerce flowing through the international trade corridor. And then you had Iran's military responding by targeting 85 American military sites in Bahrain and Kuwait. Within all of this, leading to Trump reacting today by seeming to say that he's giving up on the current ceasefire.
To me, I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they'd use it. As far as I'm concerned, it's over.
And while you had Trump saying that he'd allow his negotiating team to continue talking with Iran, he also said that it's, quote, just a waste of time dealing with them. And then he also suggested that he might reinstate his naval blockade near the Strait of Hormuz and said that he was probably, quote, going to hit them hard tonight. He even suggested that he's once again considering taking Karg Island, right, the hub of Iran's oil industry, which could require putting boots on the ground, as well as similarly rehashing his threats to attack Iran's infrastructure and desalination plants, which again, experts have previously said could be a war crime. And all of that is, on the other side, you have the Iranian government questioning whether the ceasefire is really working. Where you had Iran's foreign ministry saying in a statement today that the US had made, quote, important and essential parts of the MOU signed last month ineffective. In the statement pointing to the latest US attacks on Iran, as well as Israeli strikes on Lebanon, along with the reinstatement of sanctions and the, quote, violation of Iranian arrangements in the Strait of Hormuz. And so then, as far as reactions, you saw oil prices going to its highest level in weeks. Where you had Brent crude, the international benchmark, rising 6% to more than $78 a barrel. You've also got the national price of a gallon of gas in the US hitting $3.80 a gallon, though there I'll say, one, that's nowhere near the highs that we saw Trump get things to earlier this year, but two, it's still more than 27% higher than it was before Trump's war, and three, if the war is back on or whatever the hell happens from here, it could go back to the highs, if not go past those. So Trump, he appears really not to be worried by all this. Or at least he's coming off like more baffled by the fact that his deal-making experience in the business world, it hasn't translated to international relations success.
I made a lot of money. I had a lot of great success. Tremendous success. Everything I did, I was successful. And I deal with these guys and they say, this is from a different school. They're liars, they're cheats, they're sick people. They've hurt their people. They killed 54,000 people as of now that were protesting. You know, when people say, how come they haven't taken over? They can't take over because they're dead.
And Trump's apparent, disdain for the Iranian regime, like how it treats its people, it stands out for a number of reasons. One, because even though a lot of people have memory hold it, you had people pointing to the fact that Trump was sending ICE to cities, American citizens were shot and killed in the street. Though obviously not at the level of tens of thousands, but then also two, during Trump's second term, the US has sent back more than 100 Iranians. And that includes, according to their lawyers, people at risk of being arrested, tortured, or even killed. The most recent deportation flight, it's believed to have taken place only weeks after the regime's crackdown on anti-government protests left thousands dead. And now, you've got a new lawsuit claiming that the Trump administration not only sent people back to Iran, but they actually worked with the Iranian officials to give them the people they specifically wanted. The lawsuit even says that immigration officials broke the law by sharing the names and immigration records of Iranian citizens who were seeking asylum in the United States and then allowed Iran to select specific individuals for deportation. This including dissidents, members of Christian minorities, and people who had participated in movements advocating for women's and LGBTQ+ rights. Or you've got the lawsuit alleging that the two sides worked in tandem to pressure these Iranian detainees to forego their rights and to coerce them to agree to return to Iran without assurances for their safety upon return. And so overall, the situation with Iran, it's just a nightmare, chaotic mess. There's so many layers. It's like a 7-layer Trump fuck up lasagna, just handcrafted, homemade, right? No one seems to be able to quite fuck it up like Grandpa can. And then we've got even more we got to dive into in just another minute. But first, let me thank a sponsor and say, at this point, hearing about another massive data leak, it almost feels like checking the weather. And one recent exposure included 149 million usernames and passwords from major online services. And one of the huge problems is that once that information gets out there, it doesn't just disappear. It gets copied, sold, and reused. And that's why I like having today's sponsor, Incogni, working in the background. Because one of the biggest weird parts is that it's usually not the company you gave your information to that's the problem. It's all the companies you've never heard of that bought it afterward. And Incogni works behind the scenes, contacting those data brokers and requesting your information be removed, so you're not stuck chasing companies you didn't even know existed. They've also added custom removals, so if you find your information on a people search site or another website, their privacy team can request those removals too, with the unlimited and family unlimited plans. And I really like logging into my dashboard and seeing that progress. It's nice knowing that something's actually happening instead of just hoping my information disappears on its own. And while you can't stop every data breach, you can make it a whole lot harder for your personal information to keep circulating. So hey, scan that QR code or go to incogni.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco for 60% off. That's incogni.com/DeFranco, code DeFranco to get your personal data off the market. And then for your final block today, we have more news you need to know, starting with FIFA. They just launched a major racism investigation, and you have iShowSpeed at the center of the whole thing. Right, Speed, if you don't know, he's one of the biggest live streamers in the world. He's been live streaming this year's matches to his tens of millions of followers. But that also apparently went sideways at the Argentina-Cape Verde game in Miami, Florida.
What are you saying? What are you saying? Like, what are you even saying, bro?
You have some reports saying that at some point while the fan was yelling at Speed, she said, "Go cry to the zoo." And then you had other reports claiming she also said, "N-word, go home." And that's also in addition to another situation that's now blown up where it appears that a fan seems to be making maybe monkey gestures at him. All while the online comments, a lot of those have been pretty bad as well. Some saying he acts like a stupid ass animal, and some saying he, quote, deserved a lot of what Argentina's fans said about him. So with all of this playing out, you had FIFA responding saying they strongly condemn racism, hate, and discrimination in all forms, and adding that the FIFA World Cup is a celebration of unity, diversity, and respect, and saying anyone who acts in a manner that undermines those values is not welcome in our game. Right? And you also have this coming just a few days after a senator from Paraguay had an absolute Karen meltdown against Mbappe, posting things like, "That brute never even learned to write. Instead of breast milk, he sucked on coconuts, and the most educated creatures he ever listened to were chimpanzees." And then even before that, you had Belgium coach Rudy Garcia saying that the Senegal was one of those teams that tend to lose their tactical structure towards the end of their match. With critics there claiming that his comments hit on racial stereotypes of African teams being powerful and instinctive, yet tactically naive, emotionally fragile, or unable to withstand pressure. And while you had him trying to clear that up, saying he was referring to teams unaccustomed to managing a lead in high-level World Cup matches, not just African teams, a lot of people, they just weren't buying that. Though at the same time, you've got a lot of people pointing out that these racial issues, they're not new. For years, you've had people calling for some type of protection to make the World Cup a comfortable experience for everyone. And while FIFA, they've made some steps in the right directions by calling these situations out and making their stands clear, there's still a long way to go, which is why you've got people saying things like, we need to have constant forms of anti-racism education and campaigns to make sure the beautiful game really is beautiful, not just a slogan that FIFA likes to use for marketing purposes, but a beautiful game in which diverse populations, different countries come together to celebrate sport and football. Also in the news, we have even more Graham Platner news, or rather updates. And that because his ex, Lindsay Fifield, she just accused him of repeatedly taking off condoms without her consent during sex. Ray Fifield dated him from 2013 to 2015, and last month she told the New York Times that he was physically abusive. Also saying she made journal entries after their breakup, calling him the most toxic, literally abusive man on earth who destroyed her life. She also said she only ever mentioned him removing condoms in off-the-record interviews because she was too embarrassed to say anything about it publicly at first. And with that, claiming it happened 6 times while they were together. And also she claims that, quote, she confronted him both during and after sex because he knew that she wasn't on birth control and how dangerous that was. But then with that, you had her claiming that he would just, quote, act cute about it. And now you have her saying that she's going public to show that Jenny Rassicoat, who we talked about yesterday, was not alone in her allegations. And then on top of that, she felt like she needed to say something for the sake of the voters as well.
They needed to know the truth. They needed to know, because these things translate. It's not like the things that he does in private in his relationships with women, the things that he has done to women, coercive control, lying, deception, abuse. You can't be that way in private and not have it translate into how you would govern or how you would, when you're put in a position of power.
And well, as of recording, Platner hasn't responded to this most recent allegation. He did post a video earlier this week in response to kind of everything else, saying any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically false. And all the while, you've also got Maine Democrats still scrambling to figure out what the hell they're going to do if he ends up dropping out of the race, as is expected. And with that, you're seeing some reports even claiming that his team is trying to influence the process to replace him, or with the party apparently pushing back there. And then for our final bit of news today, we jump from Maine all the way over to Texas, where you have Ken Paxton, Mr. Self-described anti-voter fraud himself, now being accused of doing that exact crime 6 times over. Because apparently, for the last 2 years, he's been using an old address on his voter registration. You have that including the one that he used to vote in the May runoff that made him the Republican nominee for the US Senate in Texas. And you had this all coming out when he split from his wife. Because in 2025, his wife said in a divorce filing that Paxton had moved out of their Collin County home the year before that. And you have reporting from ProPublica and the Texas Tribune that have linked him to a home in Denton County since February. But, interestingly enough, his voting records, they say otherwise. And so with this, they apparently reached out to him multiple times last month, asking about the situation. I'm talking phone calls, voicemails, emails, but up until this week, they were quiet. That is until a spokesperson from his team issued a statement saying that Paxton has been a national leader on election integrity with a long record of defending Texas elections, and adding that attempting to insinuate otherwise and tear him down with a baseless lie-filled tabloid story is not real reporting. Though also, I got to put all this into perspective. Earlier this year, you had Paxton launching a tip line specifically for people to report suspected cases of voter fraud, where he said free and fair elections are a cornerstone of a thriving republic. We will stop at nothing to uncover and stop any illegal voting activity. Or even had him putting out information about election laws in Texas, which said specifically you must register to vote using the address of where you reside. And really the only loophole to that law is if you're someone like a college student who's living in a dorm, but you still plan on going back home to an old address at some point. And there, you've got election experts saying things like, when you start doing things that suggest, oh, I've fully moved, I'm just wink, wink, saying I intend to return, that's when you get into questionable territory. And I don't know, I guess to me, nothing says I've fully moved like a divorce after your wife accuses you of cheating. So I think things could get rough from Paxton here if laws matter. And I say it like that because I feel like a number of Republicans, especially over the last 2 years, have made it so that we should feel like laws don't matter, but we should remember they should still matter. And while usually in a situation like this, if true, it could be hard to prosecute because you have to prove that someone intentionally broke the law. As others have pointed out with Paxton, certainly the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Texas, someone who has made claims about election integrity and made it a priority of his office, should be charged with knowing the laws. And others adding, when our elected officials who are tasked with passing and enforcing these laws exhibit troubles in engaging with the voting process themselves, that raises serious questions. So we'll have to wait to see what Paxton has to say here, if he says anything, and if there is a real chance that this could cause some issues for him in the future. But that, my friend, you beautiful bastard, is the end of your Wednesday show. But also, do I have a wild ride ahead for you if you'd like? Because you should now, if you have not already, go watch today's new Crashing Out episode. Think of it as the Wednesday after show. And if this show is 90% news, 10% opinion, that is the polar opposite. And I'm actually going to leave you with a 2-minute preview of today's episode because it really embodies what the show is which is me poking and prodding Alex to go on rants. Some of it happens on camera, some happens off, but then, what a ride. So enjoy, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Phil, Mitch McConnell's probably dead, and I'm not allowed to talk about it on most platforms, but I'm going to try to talk about it on this platform because this isn't fucking TikTok. Am I deep enough? Was I deep enough in? Was I allowed to curse this soon?
I think you're fine.
I'm being silenced everywhere because I want to tap dance, and nobody wants me to tap dance. People are like, oh, you shouldn't talk bad about Mitch McConnell. He can't hear me. He's brain dead. He's brain dead like the emperor on the golden throne, surrounded by a series of custodies, which are congressional security guards, while he's being hidden from us by his wife, who has fled the country like a duchess from a medieval rebellion, Phil. These are the words I tried to say on TikTok. They said that was against the community guidelines. Who's posted against me? His daughter? His daughter's not online anymore. Mitch McConnell's daughter has disappeared from the internet the same way Mitch McConnell's spine disappeared after he marched with Martin Luther King. Did people know that? Did you know that Mitch McConnell's real first name is Addison? Did you know that, Phil? No. And people aren't allowed to know that because Larry Ellison bought TikTok because Joe Biden's an old stupid man who sold the goddamn company, and now Donald Trump's allowed to post there all day with Spencer Pratt. But if I talk over there, Phil, people go, oh, that's against community guidelines. You're being too mad to the corpse of the man that stole the Supreme Court, and now women bleed out in parking lots in hospitals across the South. Fuck Mitch McConnell. Fuck his whole family. Fuck these motherfuckers. I am so tired. I'm constantly, Phil. It's constant. The show's called Crashing Out.
Whew. Schrodinger's senator. Getting you really, really riled up. He's both alive and dead right now. I gotta say,